We say things like, maybe later, perhaps another time, or I'll see you tomorrow. But for some of us, there won't be a tomorrow. Listen as your worst nightmares come to life. These nightmares have become someone's reality. My name is Justin Crowley, and this is The Murder Project. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 39 of The Murder Project. We are nearing 40, and we are super pumped about that because you know what's right around the corner, and that's Two Not Cops coming at you soon. In this episode of The Murder Project, we are going to be doing the part 3 debrief to the Thomas Kelly Brown case. Now, if you guys joined us on the last episode, we left off on a little bit of a cliffhanger, but we're going to go ahead and finish this series out on this episode of the podcast, and we've got a little surprise for you to go along with it. That's why we've had an additional break in here, a little bit of time to collect our thoughts and get everything together for this episode. If you're new to the Murder Project, the Debrief is an episode where I sit down with my good friend and former police officer Mike Smith to discuss the cases further. In the Debrief, we discuss the cases from both sides of the aisle, theories that we might have, and anything we think needs a second look. The Debrief is an unscripted and off-the-cuff commentary about the cases that we are currently covering. The hope of the Debrief is to break the cases down further, but in a relaxed environment with the true crime that we love and also some laughter. So, let's get the episode started. Mike Smith in the house.
Yes, indeed.
Back in the house. Thank
That's
goodness,
right,
man.
yeah.
We had a little unscheduled break there because we had something come up that we think you guys might actually enjoy to bring to this case that ties right into this case. And what is that I'm talking about, Mike?
That is that we got a chance to interview the mother of Thomas Brown, Penny Meek. Very exciting that she was willing to do that. So we took a couple hours to head up there and speak with her over the course of an afternoon, and it was we learned a lot.
Yeah.
We all learned about some things we need to correct.
Yep, a few corrections in there.
Yeah, we'll get to that. And it was a great visit. She was very friendly and seemed very open. So I definitely walked away feeling very confident in the information that we did gather.
Absolutely. We kind of just decided to go out and see, like, hey, what if we reached out and she responded and let us go talk to her? And that is exactly what happened. So with scheduling and things like that, it took a little bit of time for everybody's schedule to match up. But while we were doing this case, when she agreed to speak to both of us, we felt like this was definitely the time to go do it. And if we had to push it, if we had to push back a week or so to get it done, we were thinking that might be in the best interest of the show, just so that we had, the information from his mom. Yeah. I couldn't think of a better person to speak to.
Yeah, it was awesome. For what it was worth, that she agreed to do it, and she was very friendly and completely understanding. And we just got to ask her whatever we wanted, but mostly, of course, we wanted to get her. I don't want to say side of the story, but the events that transpired from her perspective.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely nailed that one. So yeah, it was really cool. I never done anything like that. I never had, interviewed somebody outside of a professional setting.
Yep. That was the first for both of us.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was
outside a
cool.
professional setting. And and I want to note that we did take the podcasting equipment, some recording equipment, just in case we could kind of sit down and do like a show type setting. Mm-hmm. But she declined that offer. And to be honest, she said that she did not want to do any more recorded interviews. And, I understand where she's coming from based off of the countless interviews she's done in the podcasts that are out there where she's done interviews. And then all of a sudden you as the years go on, is what I'm trying to get at. As the years go on, the details are still there, but they may start to fade in some areas.
Yeah.
And if you mess up, it feels like what's happening to her is if she messes up a timeline by 15 minutes, someone's like, oh, boy, oh, that's not what she said.
That's true.
4 years ago.
Yeah, and she was very clear about that. She said directly, I do not want to do any more recorded interviews.
Yeah.
And so I was like, not a problem.
Yeah, we respect that decision, and we were just glad to be there.
Yeah, and I was like, do you mind if we take notes? And she was like, go for it. And we kind of chatted for a bit, kind of like a get to know you.
Yeah.
And then she was like, let's have a seat and we can get to it. And we did.
And Tucker was there too, Thomas's brother.
That's right. Yeah. The brother Tucker was there. He was also very open and answered.
Very nice guy.
Yeah, he was, and answered every question that we had. They both did without fail. And if they didn't know something, or they just would straight up say they didn't know. So It was nice.
And they like Mike just said, any questions we asked, they, in my opinion, answered openly. I mean, I know from a law enforcement background, I know Mike and I both didn't talk about it before, but when we got in the truck, one of the things we were talking about is we were looking at eye contact. We were looking at body language. We were looking at different things that we just do. Not that we meant to do it, that we were just doing. Mm-hmm. And we both walked away with the same opinion that I didn't feel like they were trying to be evasive in any way.
No, not at all.
Try to hide anything. I mean, if we asked and when you get into that level of questions, if we asked something specific that went down to like what sweatshirt, or something very specific, and they're like, oh man, I'm not exactly sure what color, something or whatever. Right, I'm actually just making this up as we're going because I don't remember the exact questions that they were kind of fuzzy on, but it was nothing like.
There's only a handful anyway.
Yeah, and it was nothing that would have been like, you should have known that.
Yeah. Also, guys, it's 6 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
And that, so it was nice that she even allowed us all together because we have no clout. We just were a couple of guys that wanted to talk to her.
Two guys that reached out to her, and she's like, yeah, sure. And, which I told her what we did and what our backgrounds were and everything. But, okay, let's go ahead and I think to kind of roll into the show, let's start with some clarifications.
Yeah.
Corrections more. Mm-hmm. Clarifications, corrections. Originally in the first 2 episodes, we stated that around 6 p.m., Tom met up with Michael and Caleb, and they rode around together. And at 8 p.m. is when Michael left, and Christian showed up. After we spoke to Penny, Thomas's mom, she stated that it was originally just Thomas and Michael, Tom and Michael, and that they had rode around together for about an hour and a half or 2 hours. And at some point in there, Caleb showed up. Mm-hmm. And right after Caleb showed up is when Michael left and then Christian showed up.
That's right.
And so we had Caleb with Tom and Michael basically that whole entire time when that's not exactly how that went down. Also, we had at 12:30 a.m., whenever the kind of search party, if you will, kind of goes out, we did clarify that Chris, who is Thomas's stepdad, was at home, and I was unsure exactly what he was doing, but he works long hours. He's an oil field guy, and so he's early to rise, early in the sack. So at the time, they did not probably feel like something like this was happening. So Chris was at home. When they left, Chris was at home asleep.
That's right. And
as things started to develop, Penny woke him up, and then he was more in the story. But he was kind of the person that stayed at home during the night hours more than anybody else. And that also goes to say that at 1:45 a.m. is when Penny went back to the house after her and Tucker's friend were out looking for Tom. Penny went back to the house at 1:45, and at 2:15, Penny calls dispatch to report Tom missing. So our timeline on that one was, I think originally we said around 3 a.m., but when we spoke to Penny, she said, no, I got home at 1:45. By 2:15, we had already decided we were going to call the Hemphill County Sheriff's Office. And then Tucker stated that he was home, I believe, by 3 a.m. is what he said, right? He had dropped his buddy off
2:30.
Yeah, and he was home. So we got that time. Of course, we're basing this off the information that other people would put out there. But at 2:30, he had dropped his friend off and was headed home or at home. And then the other clarification is that the call went out at 2:15 to the Hemphill County Sheriff's Office, and Pine Gregory did not show up at their house until 3:50 a.m.
That's right, an hour and a half later.
Yeah, a little over an hour and a half later, Pine Gregory shows up at the house. And I asked if he was on duty, and Penny said that he was, and that he was supposed to get off at 3 a.m.
That's right.
Was his cutoff time. So we initially thought that he was coming on in the morning, but his shift actually ended at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And so he shows up at their house at 3:50, which is 50 minutes past when he was supposed to get off work, but the call came in at 2:15.
Yeah.
We don't know what transpired between that time.
No.
But we do know that the call went in and he did not show up until 3:50. And it's at 4 a.m. that Tucker and Pine Gregory, which is the deputy, leave their house and go and search for Tom. And when we were talking to Penny, she stated that Pine Gregory was only at their house for about 5 to 10 minutes.
That's correct.
And we'll get into more of the details that go along with that when we start going through the timeline that we spoke about with Penny. But I just wanted to put those corrections in there. And then Tucker was with Pine Gregory from about 4 a.m. until 5:50 a.m.
Yeah, 5:45, 5:50.
Yeah, and then at between 8:30 and 9 o'clock is when the vehicle is found.
That's correct.
Okay, so we just wanted to get those clarifications out of the way, those corrections, because based off the other timelines that I've seen on the internet, when we started talking to Penny about things, she's like, oh no, it was this time. I was like, okay, we need to go ahead and walk that back now that we've actually spoken to her and we have a timeline from her perspective.
Right. So my idea for how we're going to run through this is we're just going to go through the timeline and the things that were discussed. And if you have anything to throw in there, of course, any elaborations or anything like that, go ahead.
Yep.
But I'm just going to go through the notes as I wrote them down whenever we get into that.
Yep. And so on the last episode, I left off with the 4 theories that I thought could be, kind of possible with this case, which the 4 were that Thomas died by suicide, or he died by a friend, or maybe perhaps an unknown person. Then you have number 3 was the family, and number 4 was law enforcement. Now, we talked about the suicide, and I think we kind of wrapped that up on the last episode, but now that we talked to Penny and we got the actual timeline from her, the only thing I want to touch back on that is that if there was a scenario where Tom committed suicide and the family covered it up, because that's some of the, was speaking with Penny, that was some of the things that were kind of buzzing around town, is that Tom killed himself and the family covered it up.
Yeah.
Out of embarrassment or whatever it might be.
Whatever it is that makes people do that, yeah.
But now that we've talked to Penny and we've got the timeline and where everybody was now, I don't have the information from the district attorney's office or the attorney general's office that has everybody's cell phone pings or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But I know, talking to her, that based off of this timeline, we know Tom was at the fueling station,
the Frank
Oil, at 11:30. We'll say 11:30. He filled up with fuel, topped it off, and by 12:05, the family is already in contact with Tom. So if you have a scenario that's set up where this cover-up is supposed to happen, and mind you, Tucker has a friend who's at the house.
That's right.
With him.
Yeah.
So all of this has to be happening either behind the friend's back or behind both of their backs.
Yes.
Tucker and the friend.
That's right.
Which means you take a person out of the equation, which means that the resources you have are cut even by a third.
That's right.
So we're talking about 30 minutes. And that is, like you said before we started the show, that's 30 minutes is at the upper end.
That's right. That's rounded up.
Yeah, we're rounding up to give them 30 minutes. Tom would have to get fuel. He would have to go home in some way.
That's right.
This does not explain the ping, which we've already talked about at the high school football field. But if you were to use that, as so many people are, that would mean that he would have to drive not directly from Franck Oil to his house, but he would have to drive somewhere else. So you're shaving more time off. Then the event has to happen.
Right.
Then the discovery has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then the cover-up has to happen. Or has to go and play.
Yeah, you're talking minutes.
All in this short time frame.
Right.
And I can't, unless someone has some other evidence that we don't know about, I think Mike and I agree both that we can't wrap our minds around how all of that would take place in that short amount of time and not only take place, but be successful.
That's right. And I also feel that, and then, if you go with a theory that the family was involved, not just for the cover-up, but they were the cause of death in this scenario, the timeline gets even more bizarre because he had to get fuel around 11:30, make his way home, and then whatever happened that would have caused his death, and then they start trying to get a hold of him a few minutes after midnight. That would mean that if he went home and somebody in the family had killed him, and then they would have had to start covering up all within 30 minutes.
Yeah, Penny stated that there was a rumor going around town that Tom came home and got into an argument with Chris,
mm-hmm.
and that he had slapped him around a little too hard or something like that, causing his death, and that the family covered it up. The same thing works out in this scenario as the suicide.
Yeah.
Tucker and his friend are there. So all of this took place in front of a friend,
mm-hmm.
not a family member. Now, I know blood's thicker than water type thing,
mm-hmm.
When you're thinking about that, like saying, well, the family might cover up for each other. Okay, well, what about this other guy?
Yeah.
Who basically is Tucker's friend from high school.
Mm-hmm.
They're home on holiday, and we're supposed to think that he was possibly a witness to a murder.
That's right.
Never said anything about it.
And within 30 minutes, that's from a fuel station to event occurring that causes his death to a cover-up beginning all within 30 minutes. I mean, I just don't see how that's possible.
Yeah. And if Tucker and his friend did not witness the event, then you also have to you have to factor in that now you're going to have to send them on a wild goose chase.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is going to take up more time. And that's what I'm saying. The planning that would have to go into this in the first 30 minutes to me seems like, even if spontaneous,
mm-hmm.
would fall apart.
Yeah, it would have to be a seamless, flawless plan that they made in minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just doesn't work up. So, yeah, is it possible? Sure.
Anything's possible.
Of course, because it's an unsolved case.
Right.
But I think it is highly improbable if that is what happened. So,
yeah, if we're saying that those are if that is a possibility, when we start breaking that down, it makes my mind go in circles, and I can't think of a way, like you said, that something like this would go off perfectly.
Right.
And be successful in the long run.
Right, yeah. And when we get into the timeline of events as recalled by Thomas's mother, you'll see, just like we have, how the timeline, there's just no way.
It's too tight.
Something else had to have happened. But we'll get to that when we start breaking it down. So,
outside of the family. Yeah, something had to happen outside of the family. So let's cruise into this. So when we showed up, we sat down with Penny. We started talking to her. Like we said, she was very open. And this is kind of based off of the notes that were taken. This is kind of how it unfolded.
Right, yeah. So I'm just going to read it as they were taken. And then if Justin has anything to throw in while we're going along, we will, and just try to knock this out, because even after we're finished recalling with the notes, we're still going to have plenty to talk about and things to sharpshoot and other things like that.
For sure.
So it starts out, I asked the first question, which confirms the three friends were all hanging out after the correction that Justin brought up earlier, and that all three of them left in separate vehicles. And she said yes, and that there was a camera from, I believe she said, a Methodist church.
Yep, down the street.
That saw all three people, Caleb, Christian, and Thomas, leave at different, right after each other, one after another, in their own vehicles. So then we go to 11:28. He goes directly to the gas station to fill up. The debit card transaction that we brought up several times occurs. He fills up his Durango, and then he heads out, presumably to go home.
Yep.
That's what we believe. So
which unconfirmed if whatever happened at the gas station, but that would have been the theory from the timeline.
So after she said that, she did bring up, that was we asked her about the picture.
Yeah.
That's believed to have existed but no longer does. And she said in the picture that she believed came from straight across and what she believed was a dash camera. She even went on to say she recalled seeing a timestamp.
Yeah, because I asked her specifically. I drew on my notes. I said, here is a layout. Did you see anything on here? And she said, yes. It was timestamped in the bottom left corner.
That's right.
Of the frame. And I said, well, is there any possibility that it came from a different angle? And I was speaking to her about the grade of how it falls going towards the Dollar General that's over there.
That's right.
And she said it was at an even grade, which means she believed that it was a picture from directly behind Thomas's vehicle. And I said, well, what did you see in the picture? And her answer was very abrupt when she said, I saw Thomas.
That's right. She did say it just like that, too.
And I remember when she said that, I was like, wow, like there was a lot of feeling behind that.
Right.
And
so
she said she saw him filling up. And this picture, now that we're talking about it, is, like Mike said, it's all of a sudden,
right.
It's gone.
She sees the picture, and within 7 to 10 days, she recalled that picture went missing and was never seen again, and that particular picture was denied to have ever existed by Hemphill County.
Yes, and she saw the picture, she said, within 5 days of the disappearance, and then, like you said, 7 to 10 days.
Oh, yep, I forgot the 5 days.
Yeah, so 5 days in there, she sees it. A couple days later, this picture no longer exists.
That's right, and Hemphill County said it never existed.
Right.
So, moving on. Tom misses curfew, so midnight elapses. Penny says Tom never missed curfew, as we've said before, and was always answering his phone. And she said that very specifically because if he was late, on the off chance he was late, which was rare, that she would call him and he would explain, I'm on my way, I grabbed a burrito.
Yeah, would you like something? Yeah, I'm going to the store. Would you like something? And she said that when she brought up the phone deal, basically that the way that I was getting the information from her is that Tom never ghosted her, never tried to, and then they actually started joking. Yeah. That Tucker was the one that usually missed curfew, that he would kind of stay out, that he would kind of do some stuff. But Tom was the opposite of that, in that, dynamic of the brothers. And I thought that was really important that she explained through that, because she was kind of saying, like, when this happened, it was something to be noted. Right.
And he also, like we said, he always would call and give a heads up if he was going to be late. She said that several times. Yes. He would always say something. So 12:05 to 12:10. So midnight 05, midnight 10, the family notices, of course, that he's not home, and they start messaging him. So that's when both her, Penny, and Tucker notice that these messages are no longer being delivered. Right. Which means that his phone is off. So 12:13 specifically, midnight 13, they try to call him, it goes straight to voicemail. So his phone is already off.
Which she also pointed out again, something he never did.
Something he never did. That's right. And then
his charger was in his Durango too.
That's right.
Phone charger. Go ahead.
And then the next note I have is 12:30, midnight 30. The family goes out to search. Right. And they search till about 01:45 to 0200. Right. That's when Penny returns home. I think she talks to Chris.
Yes, this is when she said she wakes him up to kind of be like, hey, this is kind of what's unfolding. Yeah. And you got to think, when you're talking about the time and they're still coordinating with Tucker and all this, is it reasonable to think that, say 20 to 30 minutes goes by before they come to the conclusion that they need to involve the sheriff's office? And I say absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
You're sitting there, you're talking about it, you're like, you're trying to run through scenarios in your head. Well, where could he be? We looked at all the spots. And that was one of the things we talked about with Penny and Tucker is that in that town, would it be unlikely with multiple people driving around? Would it be possible to have missed him? Well, of course it's possible, but it's also unlikely.
It is unlikely. Yeah, it's a very small town. There's a lot of twists and turns when you get up in the neighborhood. So unless somebody was trying to not be spotted, they were more than likely going to be spotted driving down the main drag.
Yeah. And so when she finally wakes Chris up and they get this plan, that's when that's kind of where we're at
Right. And so 02:15 is when Penny calls the county dispatch. She did note that there is no recording of her call.
Yes.
It was only recorded on a paper log, and to that I say that sounds very shady. Not what she's saying, but how did they call an emergency line and it not be recorded because...
Or non-emergency line. And that's one thing. She said she called the non-emergency line, but we brought up the fact that it doesn't matter.
Right, it should matter. That's exactly right. Yeah, I was going to skip that altogether personally, because any call going into a government building is recorded, especially when it's a sheriff's office.
Yeah.
Emergency, not emergency, doesn't matter. So to that, I think that's kind of weird and shady that it was only ever recorded on a paper log that the dispatcher recorded.
That they no longer have.
Yeah.
Because when Penny was trying to establish his timeline, get any documents, because the sheriff's office had to turn everything over to the attorney general.
That's right.
The Texas attorney general, nothing in there.
Yeah. So
there's zero information in there about when she called the sheriff's office, because supposedly they were still taking everything on a paper ledger, which is really weird.
That is
and
really
we went
weird.
and I think we got hung up on that a little too long when we were talking, because both of us were like, what?
There's a dozen things we got hung up on, which we'll point them out. 02:30, that's when Tucker returns home from his look around. And then so she's already called dispatch, and that's when 03:50 is when Deputy Pine Gregory shows up. So, of course, one of the questions I had in the last episode was he in uniform or not? That was confirmed. He was in uniform when he showed up, because of the timeline. He was supposed to be getting off shift, but instead he was answering the call to Penny.
Yeah, and there was kind of some... I asked her specifically why she thought it took him so long to get there.
Yeah, I have the note on what she said he was doing, where he claims he was backing up another officer on a DUI.
On a DUI stop, yeah. That's driving under the influence, or in Texas we call it driving while intoxicated. But yeah, supposedly he was backing him up, and if I'm not mistaken, it was also backing him up at the jail.
Yes, correct.
He was staying with him the whole time, through the whole booking process, through the whole everything, which I don't know what their sheriff policy is on how that goes. I find it kind of interesting, because assuming you have other employees at the sheriff's office, like dispatchers and jailers, perhaps, there would not be a need to have that resource be tied up,
unless the person was being that combative,
right? Which we don't have the information on that, so all of that would be speculation. So we can move on.
Yeah. So, after Pine Gregory shows up, he immediately jumps into the classic excuses, which I believe Penny and Tucker both said that the first thing he said was, I don't know where his girlfriend lives.
Yes.
Or something to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They said, well, Thomas didn't show up. He's not here. And he's like, well, I don't know where his girlfriend lives.
Yeah.
And they're like, well,
exactly.
Why? What does that have to do
Very
with
suspicious. Penny also confirms, because I asked, Pine Gregory does not collect any pertinent information about Thomas at all.
Zero. I asked her, and I went into this both of us did actually, very, very extensively, where we asked, did he get any identifying information? Did he get what vehicle he was driving, what clothes he was wearing, who he could have been hanging, any information whatsoever? To the 100 questions that I asked, zero.
That's right. Yeah, he asked nothing. He collected no pertinent information, so that is very frustrating. So by 0400, they are out looking for them again.
Tucker and Pine Gregory are out.
And they go to all the normal haunts and drive around to places that Pine Gregory claims where other kids hang out. In fact, I believe there was a quote that Tucker recalled.
Yes.
Which he said...
So when he was talking about riding around with Pine Gregory, he said that while they're going through some areas, he made the statement, I want to take you to a few other places to see if we can find him. But I stopped him. I said, hold on. Did he literally say, I want to take you there? And he said, yeah. It was usually like, hold on, I want to take you a few other places.
Yeah, which came across as...
So it's kind of weird that in that scenario, in that kind of questioning, and when they're rolling around town and they're talking, and he's like, hey, I want to take you a few places.
Yeah, because Tucker said it wasn't what he said, it was how he said it, because it was kind of silent. And then he just kind of said that real quick in a way that Tucker thought was strange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so you can go ahead and continue. Sorry, if anybody hears my dog is...
So we did find out that the last time Tom's vehicle was seen was on a video from the pavilion at 0550, which is something I didn't know before. I know that there's several clips of video that were seen, but I didn't know like where they were from, or they didn't have any names attached to it. So it was cool to learn that.
Yeah, and that's another thing that we talked about kind of in detail with Penny, was that all the other sightings, supposedly, quote-unquote sightings of Tom's vehicle going through the town. And we talked about that on the last episode where I brought that up. And basically what she said is that you cannot verify that those are Tom's vehicle, because he had the shoe polish on his car, the vehicle, the video quality was bad or whatever, until 550.
Until 550.
So that is the first confirmation based on what she told us.
That's right.
The 1 o'clock stories and all the other stuff, they kind of go from what she said, not verifiable.
Right. The next note is Penny finally goes to the Hemphill County Sheriff's Office at 0730 to speak with Sheriff Nathan Lewis.
Right.
And from what she recalled, he was just as dismissive.
Yes, very nonchalant about what was taking place, even though now we're 7.5 hours later. Yeah,
she specified that he was fidgeting with things on his desk and not really making a lot of eye contact and just acting very dismissive about the entire thing. The fact that he was gone, which, okay, real quick, I get it. We often say teens find better things to do. They run around, if it's a girl, go hang out with a boy. If it's a boy, go hang out with a girl, or whatever.
Yep.
And maybe go to a party, maybe tie one on with his buddies and get lost. But this is all circumstantial because it depends on the person that's doing it. And this is something that Thomas Brown is not known for by anybody.
Yes.
He does not do those things. He doesn't really find a lot of joy in it. Has he done it? Sure. Does he do it all the time? No. He goes home by his curfew. That's what he's known for. So that's what I'm sticking with.
And the point of that Mike's making is that this should have been a little higher of a priority.
Right.
When all of this started taking place, knowing what we knew and they knew about Tom, this should have heightened the priority level.
Absolutely.
Based on the fact that he does not do this.
If everyone in the family is saying this is not something that he does, but from what we're understanding, the Hemphill County Sheriff's Office is acting like it's fine. It's just a teenager running around doing what teenagers do. Thanks, bye.
Yeah, and this is small town America. So everybody knows everybody. We're saying this in the context of all of these people know each other.
Right.
All of these people know everything about each other. When Mike and I were at work, the chances of us going to a house where we're going to know the kid that's a runaway or a missing person, probably not likely.
Yeah.
In this town, it's 100% likely. And that's the point we're making here, is that they know too. And still very dismissive.
Yeah, very. So, also another strange thing. So that makes Pine Gregory at 350 when he shows up, and the sheriff himself, Nathan Lewis, both of them acting like it's no big deal, when to the family, of course, it's a very big deal. So that's when, around 8 o'clock, 0800 is when they receive word that the vehicle has been found by Christian's father, who went out looking in his helicopter.
Right.
Now, something important to point out is that Penny spoke to this man about what he saw. And he claimed that the vehicle was out in the open enough that he hovered down. He hovered and lowered down so that he could see into the vehicle. And said specifically to his passenger, who was
his daughter,
Christian.
You're right.
He told her to look away in case they were going to find something disturbing. And they remember that very clearly.
Yeah.
Now, when the sheriff's office goes to, where they report the vehicle is found is in a small grouping of trees where it is believed a helicopter could not be able to do that.
Right. That's what I got from Penny.
Very suspicious, because Christian's father is the one who found the vehicle and could hover down close enough on the driver's side to see into the vehicle and knew right away that Thomas's body was not in there, that he was not in the vehicle, alive or dead, doesn't matter. He's not in it. So he remembers that very clearly, but where the sheriff's office says it was found, it's in a place where the helicopter couldn't possibly reach. Why? We don't know, but that's pretty dang suspicious.
Yeah, that's two different stories, one from the law enforcement agency and one from the guy who found the vehicle.
Right.
And they don't exactly match up. And then...
Yes, and so from what Penny recalls, a deputy named Jerry Lynn Ortega is the first person to make it to the vehicle. I believe she operates not just as a deputy, but also as like a CSI.
Oh, yeah.
She's the first one to find the vehicle, and she automatically is like, okay, this is suspicious. Nobody touch the vehicle. So at this point, multiple deputies are showing up, including the sheriff, Nathan Lewis, and she's trying to hold them back and say, don't touch the vehicle. Nobody come near it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is all correct.
And
I think Deputy Clapp was there.
That's right.
Sheriff Lewis. I'm not sure. I can't remember if Pine Gregory was there or if he had already gone off. But either way, there was at least 3
and
deputies
so
at this location.
Deputy Ortega is trying to keep them from touching the vehicle so it can be properly processed. Nobody listens by this account. They walk straight through. Nathan Lewis walks straight up to the vehicle, opens all the doors, and starts rummaging through the vehicle.
Right.
So the scene is compromised by multiple deputies and the sheriff himself right out the gate.
Immediately. And then, so when they find this 25 caliber shell, and then the quote unquote blood smear,
droplet,
that we also need to talk about because we got to see that. We also got to see some of the pictures from inside the vehicle with the luminol test and things like that. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. But basically, when he finds this shell casing and this blood droplet, or however you want to look at it, his immediate thought is, because we're kind of talking about the timeline and, the 8:30 to 9 o'clock when Penny is up at the sheriff's office, what she says is that he immediately starts talking about suicide.
That's right.
That it is very likely that Thomas committed suicide. And her basic response is, based on what?
That's right.
And that's when he kind of starts backtracking a little bit. And then he would later go on to say, according to her, that this never happened.
That's right.
This conversation never took place.
Yeah.
And this is the conversation that supposedly took place inside his office.
That's right. Yeah. She said he takes everything he said back.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, well, I don't remember saying that. She's probably misremembering. So also very suspicious why you would jump straight to that. I don't know. So the smear, what's reported to in multiple sources for anybody that's following, is a smear or droplet. We would find out later that it is definitely a smear, and it's probably 8 inches long, 2 inches wide.
Yes.
It is a straight up smear.
Yeah,
something was saturated in blood and was smeared along the edge of the door. Now, it did cut off cleanly. What I mean by that is whatever made the blood smear was then, before it reached the end of the inside door panel, something either stopped the blood from smearing, or what was causing the smear was pulled away from the door.
Right. And it definitely looked like, if, knowing that when talking to Penny when they got the vehicle back, it was clean.
Yes.
All of the supposed evidence, blood evidence, everything was cleaned off the vehicle. But if you're looking at this, if you're looking at the pictures of the luminol, it definitely looks like that part on the door would have been a blood transfer.
Right.
Not direct contact.
Exactly. It was something that was directly...
Like, say, a sweatshirt.
That's right.
A hoodie sleeve that got saturated in blood and then touched the door.
So Penny would go on to tell us in a brief recap that she later, at the sheriff's office, saw a picture, like the actual picture taken from the scene of this blood smear, and she even confronts them and says, that is not a drop.
Right.
And she never saw that picture again.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it doesn't exist this time. It just means that it was no longer out where anybody could see it. Later, from this blood smear droplet, or whatever you want to call it, it's confirmed to be Tom's blood. But Penny did mention at this point she didn't know how they made the match.
Yeah, that was one of the things that came up.
Yeah, he's only 18 years old, so it's unlikely that he's in any national database. And nobody came to the residence to recover anything else. So we're not saying that something wasn't recovered that they could compare it against. But she's saying nobody came to the house to get something like a hair from a hair from a brush, a toothbrush, any other, piece of clothing that he might have worn recently. She doesn't know how they confirmed it to be Tom's. They just did. Is that saying totally shady? No, but it's a little suspicious.
Weird. Yeah, it's a little weird that, and also in this process, the family was not kept in the loop about how the investigation was coming about.
That's true, and we'll talk about that a lot at the end of this note recap, because for probably very specific reasons, according to investigators and the Texas Attorney General, they're not. But we'll cover that.
Mm-hmm.
So the .25 caliber auto shell casing is found on the passenger floorboard. We did see a picture of it where it was found. It was kind of sitting right next to where the rubber mat met the upholstery on the floor.
Yep.
So we did see it there. So it was not against the door.
Not in the back seat and all the places that everybody we saw it is in the passenger side.
That's right. Yeah. And these are pictures from not just the Hemphill County Sheriff's Office, but also other pictures from Klein Investigations.
Yeah, right.
There's also numerous other luminol spots from future photographs that we saw done by Hemphill County and Klein Investigations that show spots that they photographed with luminol testing in various areas of the Durango that nobody knew about before.
Right.
I did not know that.
Yep. I did not know that either. That there were hits in several different spots.
Yes. So some on the dash, some on the driver console, and then
a very obvious pulling hit on the driver's side floorboard, like where your shoe would be, like right around that area where your left foot kind of rests when you're driving or sitting there. There was a very large spot right there.
That's right. And the driver window was halfway down.
Right.
Good question that we all want to know is why, because it was November. In Canadian Texas. So cold, maybe not the coldest, but probably cold. And so everybody found that very suspicious.
Yep.
So the vehicle gets returned on Thanksgiving.
Yes.
The evening of.
Yeah, I believe she said around 4 p.m.
So the afternoon, my bad. Yeah, not evening, afternoon. And later, Penny would talk to Deputy Ortega and ask if the vehicle had been processed properly because they returned it so quickly, to which she said that the deputy looked kind of frazzled when she asked her that, and then the vehicle was picked back up on Saturday.
Yeah, so we were thinking, based off the other information, that the vehicle was picked up the following day, on Friday.
No.
And it was not.
No,
it was not picked up until Saturday.
Right.
And when Tucker had already said when they dropped the vehicle off, and Penny was like, y'all don't need anything else from the vehicle? And he's like, no. And he's like, well, we did what anybody else would do. And so we went through the vehicle.
Of course.
And if you know anything about law enforcement, the vehicle, well, number one, it was contaminated on set.
Yep.
Right when they found it, the vehicle evidence was contaminated. Then you drop the vehicle back off. You leave it with the family. You come pick it up 2 days later.
It's totally compromised.
It's the whole thing's compromised. There's nothing in there that you can use in the future.
No way. It'd definitely be what a lawyer would call fruit of the poisonous tree.
Yeah.
There's no evidence collection. There's no chain of
no chain of custody as far as the evidence chain and all that stuff goes. It's not there. And then if you go back and you try to make one 2 days after you drop the vehicle off, when you said you're done with it, that chain of custody or evidence log is no good.
No, not at all. So just to reiterate before we move on, he goes missing the night before Thanksgiving. The day of Thanksgiving, the vehicle's returned that afternoon. And then, and when they get it back, it's been cleaned.
Yes.
That's very important. Tucker said specifically, this vehicle was cleaned. It wasn't like they took everything out of it, but it was very obvious they had been wiped down.
Yeah.
Outside the realm of possibility? No, not at all. If there was blood in there, somebody obviously wiped it up, is what we're getting at.
And that's sometimes that we would do stuff like that in situations where when you return evidence back or something like that, you don't want the family to have to do that.
No.
But that's also something that's communicated. We went ahead and cleaned the vehicle up for you, or we went ahead and cleaned this area of the house up for you so you don't have to do that part of it. But one of the things that I asked Tucker was, how did Thomas usually keep his vehicle? And, he said he'd usually have the spit bottle in there.
Yeah.
And that was another thing that Penny brought up, is that there was a cup found in his center console that no one claims.
That's right.
And Penny said Thomas never drank out of cups.
He bought bottles.
He always bought bottles. And then Mike said, so he can use it as a spitter. And they said, yes. Mm-hmm. And then I asked Tucker, I said, how was his vehicle usually? And they both said it was kind of dirty.
Yeah.
It had his school stuff in it. It had stuff in there. And I said, well, was it like our vehicles back where I live, where it had like the layer of dust on there? And he said, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I said, so was that layer of dust in all of those areas still intact? No, it was not.
No, it was not. And we later, while we were looking at the pictures that she offered, from the 250-page investigative document from the Texas Attorney General's office. That's what we were looking at when we saw these pictures. There were pictures on the condition of the vehicle, and so you can see all over spitters, bottles laying in the backseat floorboards, rolling around, all that stuff. So that adds up to me.
Yeah.
Because who didn't do that?
Yeah, exactly.
So then we fast forward because the investigation goes cold.
Right.
So this is when the backpack is found. So this is January. And
this is one of those, when we started talking about that, I was very curious to find out in what the circumstances were on how this backpack was found. Mm-hmm. And so what we found out is that in that area, there were some electrical power line repairs or new construction going up in that area.
Because of the storm.
Because she stated there was an ice storm.
And there was.
Yep, that had taken place right before the backpack was found. So the guy that found the backpack was working for the power company that was doing the work on the power lines. And as he was driving out, there's a gated area where he had to open up the gate to be able to leave the property. And when he got out of his truck to open up the gate, he was able to just look over to the side and see the backpack sitting off the side of the road in this area of either trees or some sort of foliage of some kind. Right. I don't know exactly how it is, but he was able just to see the backpack sitting there.
Right. And so we asked all the other questions about the backpack, the condition of it, everything we've already covered, and it was all confirmed.
Yeah.
So it was molded and mildewed. The laptop was destroyed from being out in the elements. So all of that added up. So we didn't ask too much more about that.
And did she say that she has never actually seen the backpack?
That's correct. Yeah. I was going to get into it. When we get to the end. The family has been kept out of a large majority, not just from the circumstances in the early beginning,
but as it develops,
they're
just left in the dark.
Less and less was shared, and we'll talk about that briefly.
Yep.
So the next thing we step to is, so by now, time has gone by. So after the backpack is found is when she enlists the services of Klein Investigations. Mm-hmm. And that's when they start setting up searches and things like that. And this is, a year, 11 months later, the phone is found.
Yeah, 11 months after he went missing.
Yeah, was it October of the next year?
They found the
phone was found.
Yes.
Yeah. So she said specifically, the search for this phone, the search that found the phone, was organized by Klein Investigations, and only Klein and the sheriff's office knew where this search was going to take place. And if you remember all the other details about how this phone was found, which we're going to cover it anyway, but that makes it very suspicious. Only Klein knew, and only the sheriff knew. Not even Penny knew.
Right.
Because they have to do it as clean as possible, and she's made sure to say that very clearly. So, the later the phone would be found, and we did get a lot of extra information about that. So the phone was found within 20 minutes. of the search
she
beginning.
Said 10, 20 minutes because she went out there. She said she went out to the location after everybody had organized. And there's something weird about the organization of this event in the sheriff's office.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And we'll talk about that here in just a second. But that she went out there, gave a speech, and then they had her leave in the event. And I'm just adding this in here, but she didn't say why they had her leave. But I'm sure what it goes to is in the event they found something,
right? They
don't want the family to be on site to have to see it.
Absolutely.
Or be the ones that find it.
Yeah.
Heaven forbid.
Yeah, she did mention that. She came out, she spoke to all the volunteers and everybody that was present, and then she left. So she did say, the very next thing she said is, an hour into the search time, she was already getting phone calls about the phone being found. She had no idea what they were talking about.
Yeah. And she said that she was getting text messages and phone calls saying, I heard they found a phone. And she's like, I have no idea. And then not long after that, she received a phone call from Philip Klein. Mm-hmm. And he said that they did, in fact, find a phone, but they do not believe that it's Thomas's. And then later on, she said that Deputy Clapp, who was out there, who I believe is the sheriff now in Hemphill County.
That's correct.
Which that was another correction that we needed to make because there still are people from that original group that are in Hemphill County. I thought they did a full wipe, but that's not what happened after we talked to Penny. Mm-hmm. We found out, well, that's not actually true. But she said that Deputy Clapp had even spoken to her and said they do not believe that that's Thomas's phone based off the number one, the color.
That's right.
Number two, the condition.
Yeah. So confirmed, a rose gold iPhone was found during this search.
Yep.
That
Penny said she saw pictures of it.
She saw pictures people were sending her saying, is this Tom's phone? To which her answer is no. She is 100% sure that Thomas's iPhone was gold. And when I asked her how sure she was, she told me, I still have the box.
Yeah, she said the box is right back there in that room. Mm-hmm. And I said, did anybody ever come collect it or want to look at it or get any information from it? No.
No serial number, no nothing. So again, this phone is found 11 months after it went missing in a freshly mowed bar ditch 10 minutes into a search of that very location.
And something else to add to it, because we were talking about the timeline, about people finding out where to search at. And she said the information was given out about 24 hours before to the volunteers.
That's right.
The sheriff's office knew this whole time, which she told us that originally when they said that they were going to, that Philip Klein had told her originally when they were going to set up this search, the sheriff's office said that it's going to be a hazard. It's going to be a hazardous area, that no one's going to be allowed to park in the bar ditches. No one's going to be able to, kind of gather up in that area. And if people did and park their vehicles over there, he was going to tow them all.
That's right. He was going to side them and tow them. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty weird if somebody went missing and is presumed dead in my county and people that want to organize a search. I'm not going to threaten to cite and tow them for it.
Yeah. And on a search like that where something important could be found, Pine Gregory and Nathan Lewis were definitely out there. But they weren't.
They weren't, no.
Nathan Lewis, from what I understand, was seen in town all day carrying out various shopping things at the hardware store, at the grocery store. He was in public the whole time the search was going on, but he was not at the search. And when I originally started talking about this, my point is that I was trying to nail down a timeline of when this phone could have possibly been placed out there.
That's right.
Because from all the evidence that we've been shown, this is no chance that this is Tom's phone.
No.
This is a plant.
Not even that. And before you continue, there's one other big detail. It rained.
That was what I was going to say.
That's right.
Rained.
It rained a couple hours before the search. The ground was still wet. But the phone was dry.
Yep.
So these are things that we're being told. Of course, nobody knows that. I certainly didn't know it before I had this conversation.
Nope.
So not only is it the wrong color, completely intact, in a freshly mowed bar ditch, a couple hours after it rained.
Yeah.
It's bone dry.
No water damage whatsoever.
There's no way.
Yeah.
There's just no way. And it was just sitting out in the open because, as we've just said before, a half dozen times, it was found 10 minutes into the search beginning. Someone was just like, hey, whose phone was that?
Yeah, and supposedly the lady that found it even made the statement. she has a rose gold iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
When she looked down, she thought she dropped her phone.
Right.
She reaches into her pocket and she's like, oh no, my phone's right here.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, there's a phone over here.
That's right.
And then that's when kind of all this unfolds. But there's nothing as far as evidence collected from the family in reference to Tom's phone, but they were able to confirm that it was his phone.
Right, but not till the end of the year.
Yeah, right.
December 30th or 31st is what Penny recalled. The exact day, she's not sure, but it wasn't until the end of the year. So 2 months later and change.
Yep.
They finally say, this is Tom's phone. And she is completely baffled as to how they came to understand that. And frankly, so am I.
Yeah, because there's no explanation given on how they verified that it was Tom's phone or what the actual condition of the, like, if you were to bring the phone out and I could look at it and be like, that's Mike's phone right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know Mike's phone. That's his phone. No one ever did that.
Nobody.
They just said, yeah, based off of the evidence and yada yada, however they did it, this is Tom's phone. And they're like, how is that possible? And they're like, great. Move along, please.
Exactly what they do.
This is what it sounds like.
So, the next note that I have that she said is, the Sheriff Nathan Lewis accuses Klein of placing the phone, but then they say he didn't do that.
Right. Yeah.
That's
that was another
thing.
big, yep.
That he's like, I don't know, maybe they put it there. And then they're like, wait, you serious? He's like, no, I didn't say that.
Yeah. He's like, nah, man, I was just kidding. You know, maybe the investigator threw it out. That was one of the things. Maybe he threw it out there trying to get, he was trying to get like a rise in the case, or he was trying to basically like, it was theatrics.
Yeah. Not something you should just casually throw around, but hey.
Not a law enforcement officer and definitely not the sheriff.
Yeah, a lot of that going
Please
around.
Please don't say stuff like that.
So, the next note I have is, after the phone is found and Penny goes to the sheriff's office for the umpteenth time, this is when she sees the picture of this blood smear for the first time, and she's like, wait a sec, that is not a drop.
Yeah.
That is a large smear, and that's when the picture is taken away and you never seen it again. So then we fast forward yet again to April 2017? April 2017. That's when Klein brings in the cadaver dog.
Right.
It does hit on the Durango, of course, but it doesn't lead anywhere.
Right.
And from what I recall, it doesn't yield anything.
No. And speaking of cadaver dogs, I was going to wait till we got to this point. So originally when Tom went missing, the next day, or I believe 2 days later, so possibly on that Saturday when they picked up Tom's vehicle for the second time from the residence, Sheriff Lewis called in his own cadaver dog to see if they could find any evidence from that, which is where they say that, were you going to get into that part here in a second? What he said is that when they brought the cadaver dog out to the location where the vehicle was found, it hit and then it tracked a scent over towards the direction of the river. Mm-hmm. And then they said it goes cold. They don't have anything. And so I stopped Penny while she's saying this and I said, can I ask you a question? What kind of dog did they use? And she says, so I asked the same question. Right. Because you can have different types of search dogs. It doesn't have to be a cadaver dog, search dog, whatever. There's different types of searches you would do depending on what the situation is. I don't have to get into all that, but the thing is that I asked her, I said, what did they use to verify Tom's scent? Mm-hmm. And she said, from what I understand, she said, I don't know, but from what I understand, they used a baby wipe. Is that?
Yes.
Is that when we had the baby wipe conversation?
Yeah.
And they said they wiped something off of the vehicle.
Yes.
And let the dog smell it. Right. And that's how it and I was like, what in the world? Where are we living at?
Yeah.
What is this?
To which she said, I don't know why they didn't just come here and ask for a piece of clothing.
And I said, did anybody show up? Yeah.
Right.
And so she said several days later is when the search dogs from the TDCJ Clements unit, which is in Amarillo, they have like the bloodhounds, like the legit search dogs.
Yeah.
She said later on, they show up and they're pissed that no one called them.
Yeah.
Days before this.
Yeah, this is days later.
Yeah. And they showed up to Penny's house. They retrieved an article of clothing. Mm-hmm. They let the dog sniff the clothing, and that dog hit on nothing.
That's right. Zip.
Zero.
Too much time
nothing.
Had gone by.
Yeah, and that's where I think to myself, is this planned? or is this stupidity? We'll get into that later. Let's continue on. Golly.
So the very next thing, the case goes cold. And the next thing that happens is on January 9th, Deputy Pine Gregory is looking for bucksheds on duty.
Here we go. Yeah.
And
just stretching his legs,
Stretching his legs, bebopping about 300 feet off the road where he finds the remains. So there was a lot to unpack when we got to this part.
Oh, boy,
and we're about to hit it, and we need to be careful we don't talk and repeat ourselves too much, but there was so much. I'm going to start by saying when they say remains, they meant 4 pieces of remains, and those pieces are a skull, the jawbone, a femur, and a few other smaller bones.
Is what they said, yeah.
That's correct. That's all that's found at this location, and aside from the remains, a pair of shoes.
Yes.
Now, I'm trying to do this as efficiently as I can, but it's hard because I get so frustrated talking about it. So, previous searches in this area were reported to have been turned away by the sheriff's office. In one specific situation, the firefighters, I'm assuming they're volunteers in a small town.
They are.
They're going out and searching, and they go to head to this location where the remains are later found, and they are turned away by the sheriff's office claiming they have already searched it.
And in another situation, they said they also have an additional ongoing investigation in that area pertaining to drugs.
That's right.
And they weren't allowed to search it. And on one particular incident, it was Pine Gregory who turned him away.
That's right.
Even stating that multiple witnesses had seen him sitting at that gated area on duty a lot.
A lot, yeah.
Like sitting down there, I'm not saying blocking,
right,
but I'm saying sitting in front of this gate that goes into this area because if I'm not mistaken, this is private land.
That's right.
Where the remains were found.
That's correct.
Which, after the remains were found, the owner of the land was not even contacted to let them know that, well, we're on your property.
Yeah, we're on your property.
Doing an investigation on a missing person we found their remains.
So, to summarize...
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, to summarize, an on-duty county deputy was just bebopping on somebody's property looking for bucksheds without permission.
Yes.
Yes, that is correct. That is what we're saying. Does that sound strange to anybody else? It does to me. That's weird.
Very weird.
So, the remains are found to be Tom's by dental record on January 15th. So 5 days later.
Yeah.
And I'm only saying 5 and not 6. I know math, don't worry. It's because they had to be found, identified, and then sent away.
Yeah, all that has to be processed and then sent. And then in record timing.
Yes.
They identify through dental records, which Penny brought up. She is not sure where they got these dental records from because no one asked her
where he goes to
the dentist, or if which I'm not saying that there could not be a subpoena or warrant or something issued to whatever place he went somehow that these couldn't have been the dental records couldn't be gotten by legal means.
Right, of course.
But it's just strange to me that no one ever reached out to the mom
to ask
any
where
questions.
Does he go to the dentist?
Or, and I don't,
Right.
Maybe she's been left out of everything else, so.
That's true. So the shoes are also reported to be found. They cannot confirm whether or not, no matter how macabre it is, that there are feet in them. Just a pair of shoes is found, but they are never shown in picture or in person, I believe, to Penny.
That is correct.
They never are.
I asked her, did you ever get to see the shoes? And she said no.
So that, I don't know, maybe somebody who lived with him could confirm that is his footwear?
Yes.
Yes, that's never done. Strange? Yeah, put it on the list. So,
chalk another one.
Later, the remains, which I could hardly call it that, but that's fine.
Mike and I were both shocked.
Yes.
When she told us what the remains consisted of.
Yeah.
We're like, wait a minute, that's nothing.
Yeah.
A skull, a femur.
A jaw.
Yeah, which I'm going to count that all as one.
Normally you would.
But one of them's also additional identifying information.
Right.
So it's definitely pertinent to this. But the skull and jaw and the femur.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
And some assorted smaller bones.
And I'm like, are you kidding me? That's it?
Yeah, and this
no
was...
rib cage, no spinal cord, no arms, like nothing?
Yeah, nothing else. Yeah.
Searched the entire area around there.
And found no other additional remains. That, to me, is highly improbable.
Yes.
Not impossible, because we can't always say that. Improbable because, as we know, Thomas's dimensions were he was a bigger,
6'1",
healthy boy.
Yeah.
Even if we were going with what we spoke about briefly, again, no matter how macabre it is, that he became a food source for local fauna. You don't often see whole rib cages being taken away.
Just disappear.
It's
spinal cord gone.
The entire spinal cord
gone. The other leg, the
gone.
Whole thing.
Yeah, the whole other
both
leg.
Arms.
Yeah,
everything gone.
I just don't see it happening. And I'm from the country where I've seen all manner of dead and rotting things laying about in the fields, being picked at by the wildlife.
After scavengers have already torn it apart, and guess what? The majority of it's still there.
Still there.
Because they don't take off. It's almost like they pick. There was this crazy. Do you remember that video? Were you with me when we were in the oil field when we watched that video of that? Was
the hippo?
The hippo that died.
Yeah.
And then they had a
time elapse.
Time elapse of all the scavengers that came out, starting from the top down.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what was left over? The skeleton.
That's right. And the scraps that they couldn't peel away.
Right. And so the reason we're saying that is because it's like, where's the rest of it at?
Yeah, very unlikely, and frankly, not something that's possible to me.
No, I don't get that. And I mean, even we got to see the autopsy report, which I'll talk about that here in a minute. But there were on the bones found, there were traces of what would you say, scavenger activity?
Yeah, scavenger activity. They have to put that. So if it's left outside for any time, and of course this one, we're assuming it's been left outside for some time, there is indications of scavenger activity. That's pretty common dialogue for any remains that are found outside, because guess what? There's gonna be scavenger activity, insect and animal, and otherwise, whatever otherwise is.
Yes.
So I only have a few more notes before we jump into a bunch of other deets and we break down some other things that we had. You might have more, Justin, but here's what I have left. We asked her the question about asking for Tom's passcode.
Yes.
So she confirms that the sheriff's department asked her
on multiple occasions
for Tom's passcode for his phone, and that is why she reached out to multiple people. But later, they would say that they did not do that.
Mm-hmm.
They did not ask her for the passcode. So,
and these were all conversations that took place either in person or by phone.
That's right.
And so she doesn't have where I think you can get a little crossways on this is that she sent text messages out asking if people have the passcode.
Right.
And so that is a direct link back to her asking for that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when I asked her if there were any text messages to her, she said no, the deputies would either call me or while they were at one of the numerous meetings at the sheriff's office, they would just say in passing, hey, by the way, did you ever find Tom's passcode?
Right. So
that was another thing. I was watching a lot on body language and stuff like that. She went straight through that thing like...
Yeah. Yeah, she seemed very open and in earnest for for this entire conversation. I didn't get a single sign of deception. Now, I'm not a professional interrogator. I deliver Pepsi. But there was a time where I was good at that stuff, and I even went to a class on it, like most people who'd been in law enforcement for any amount of time, and I did not get that sense at all.
No, neither did I.
So... the next note I have is that Sheriff Nathan Lewis considers the case of Thomas Brown a cold case, but refuses to turn it over to a cold case unit.
Right.
Why? We don't know. Do I think that's weird? Yeah, that's kind of weird. If he calls it a cold case, but won't turn it over to a cold case unit, very strange.
Yep. Just kind of kept it close to the...
Yep. And when he's asked about it, how did she say it? He answers very vaguely, just kind of brushes off.
Yeah, talks. I think the way that the way that I got it is he just speaks in a lot of generalities.
Yeah.
A lot where he's just like, yeah, it's such and such, and then we don't have much, and I'll talk to you next time.
Yep. And then the last note I have, the last one, before we get into anything that Justin has and breaking down a couple of things that breaking down more things while I ramble here, is within 5 days of the remains of Thomas Brown found, Jeff Castletine kills himself near where Tom's Durango was found.
Yep. Pretty close to where it was found.
Pretty close to where it was found. Very suspicious, because on the list of some of the last people that saw Thomas before he went missing was his son, Michael Castletine.
Yep. So,
just one of those things. There is no real connection that we know about, but that is very, very strange.
Yep. There was some talk about a connection between Nathan Lewis and Jeff Castletine.
That's right.
That Nathan Lewis's brother perhaps knew him, that they had lived in the same town, that they are all kind of, because Jeff and his family are not even from this area.
That's right.
Jeff was in, I think, preschool education, which is not typically a career traveled by males, if I may say. I know for a fact, if you looked at it statistically, I'm right. But I know we all probably know someone that, I'm not saying anything bad about that. What I'm saying is that was the career that he was in, which is kind of unusual based off of what his, and I'm trying not to get into a whole lot of the hearsay.
Yeah, we don't want to get too much into the weeds.
Yeah, because there is some questions about maybe some of his previous activities and the things, and speaking of Jeff, the things that he was possibly involved in and the reason why he was kind of skipping around towns and things like that. I'll let you make your own assumptions on that. I don't want to get in there because if I ended up dragging this guy through the weeds who's already perished, and it was based off incorrect information, I would feel terrible about that.
Of course, yeah.
But there is supposedly a connection between Jeff and the Lewises somehow. I'd also like to point out that during the time that the original search was going on, I did ask Penny where Nathan Lewis was, and supposedly he was at home asleep.
That's right.
This whole time. But it is odd because Michael Castletine, also going back to that, when Penny originally sent out the text messages, he was also sent a text message.
That's right. Yeah, Caleb and Christian respond immediately.
Right.
Michael Castletine doesn't respond for she guessed 30 to 45 minutes later.
Yeah. And then when I asked what was, and he basically says he doesn't know anything either. Like he's like, oh, I haven't seen him. And so I was like, well, why did it take him almost an hour to respond to your message? And she said, well, he stated in an interview with the police that he was asleep.
That's right.
Then he woke up, saw the message, and texted back. And I was like, so he was just in full-blown sleep.
Middle of the night.
In the middle of the night, and just randomly wakes up at an hour, 45 minutes, 30 minutes to an hour after you send this text message and response.
Yeah.
That's another thing where I'm saying, is it impossible? No, it's not, because now we're on a totally different, on a totally different trail. Or maybe these two things are tied in together. That's the problem when we start talking about this, is because it's so confusing. But speaking of suicide, there was mention of Thomas's grandfather that committed suicide. And the last thing that I had written down in my notes is that Penny said that she was pretty sure that Tom was unaware of his grandfather's suicide.
That's correct. She did say that.
That Tucker had just found out 6 to 8 months before Tom's disappearance that had actually happened. And he told us in the kitchen, he never told Tom that.
Right.
And then he didn't know anybody else that would have told Tom, because he had just found out about it. And Penny did not believe that Tom knew about it, which a lot of people said, well, maybe he was mimicking his grandfather's suicide.
Right.
Well, that would be hard to do if you didn't know anything about it.
That's correct.
And Nathan Lewis knew about it. because I remember one of the things that she said after they had kind of been talking about the suicides is that he made a very, I think, a disrespectful comment about, well, maybe Tom did what your dad did.
Yeah.
Something to that effect. Yeah. I'm not quoting.
Right. Yeah. She mentioned that he brought that up, which of course, if you're not getting what I'm getting at here, which is this entire thing was handled terribly, that is not something you say. Yes, is it a small town? Yes. Does everybody know each other? But have some decorum.
Yeah.
Have some tact.
Yes. Don't say stuff like that to the family member, especially being, once again, the sheriff.
Yeah.
I've said that a lot, but I'm like, golly, why do we have to keep having this same conversation about things you shouldn't say when you're the sheriff?
Yeah. We could have a whole podcast on that.
I think we could.
Just from this encounter. So, one thing I do want to address directly is, yes, there is still a ton of information that we don't know, and more information that Penny does not know, and she's the mother of Thomas Brown. And we know that the reason it is done that way is because it's believed that the family is still probably part of an investigation into his disappearance. However, whatever evidence they have or whatever trail they're following, nobody is privy to, because it's an ongoing investigation. So when we're saying things like, she isn't contacted, she isn't told about this, she isn't shown these pictures, that is why these things are happening, is because it's still an ongoing investigation, and if there's a possibility the family's involved, they can't show them everything.
Yeah.
They don't
have to give all of the details. They're not required to give all of the details about every single event that happens. However, it is usually something that the family's kept in the loop.
Right, yes. And so we can only surmise from the lack of the family being in the loop is that they are believed to be involved somehow.
Yeah.
And that's why they're not sharing with them all that information. And the public knows even less.
Exactly.
Because we had to go through a half dozen podcasts and hours of Google research time to get the information that we had prior to this meeting. And so after talking with Penny, we learned a great deal, but still we're left with a lot of the very same questions, because most of this investigation is being being held very close to the chest, because it's still an ongoing investigation. Yes, were partial remains found? Sure.
Yeah.
But not all of them. Found in a very strange place.
Yeah, which is the next thing I had on my list, was the autopsy.
Mm-hmm.
So the letter from the place that conducted the autopsy, in there it says that it is the partial skeletal remains found in January and February, which is something that I missed previous to
Holy cow.
this podcast, is because I was reading the bullet point notes that they made.
She sent you.
Yeah. And so the partial skeletal remains found in January and February, which opens up a new question that I have now.
Holy cow. Yeah, I didn't know.
Were these items found at different times? They confirmed 5 days after the skull was found that it was Tom.
Mm-hmm.
But is there other information out there that we don't have? But from the autopsy, what we do know is that Tom had blunt force trauma to his face.
That's right.
And blunt force trauma is one of those words that people use whether you're talking about somebody was hit in the face or somebody was whacked in the head with a brick. It could go a lot of different ways, and depending on how somebody uses that word, blunt force, it can confuse you. So basically what I have determined from this, Mike and I both reading this, is that there was damage to the maxilla area of his face, which I had to look all of this up because I was not aware of this. But if you can think about that little kind of bone area on your skull that would be in between your upper lip and your nose, it's that area, and it spans that whole way where you'd have like a mustache. And then also to the zygomatic arch, which if you open your jaw and close it, it would be inside that area right there of your jaw, on where the jaw is opening, not on your mouth, but where it's actually on the side of your cheek.
Right.
So right inside there. So if you put your finger under your nose and then you go over to where your jaw opens up, that would be the area, and that there was a blunt force, some sort of blunt force event that happened from left to right.
That's right. So basically, the area he's describing, front to back.
Yep.
So
From
under
the
the
nose
nose
area.
towards the ear.
Yes.
And if you draw a straight line across your cheek, that's the area that is struck from left to right.
Yep.
And so that means that it was front to back. So something struck him in the face.
And it says it's not believed to have caused serious injury or death.
Right.
But that is something, and they also state that they cannot determine whether that happened before or after he died.
Right. So at some point, we know now that Thomas Brown was struck in the face with something. No idea. Too big to be a fist.
Yep.
We do know that. So it was some
had to
type
be
of blunt instrument.
Blunt, longer object.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to, the first thing that came to my mind, and I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying the first thing that came to my mind when I thought about being whacked in the face right there and it being that distance was like a mag light.
Mag light. That's right. I thought the same thing.
I'm not putting anything on that. I'm just saying that's the first thing that came to my mind was that if you whacked someone in the face with a mag light, right across the face with a mag light, that would be exactly where it hits because the blunt force trauma stopped around that jawbone area going that in my opinion, maybe right before the cheekbone perhaps deflected, whatever. I'm just speculating here, but what I'm saying is that's the first thing I thought. I'm not saying that's what it was.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's the first thing I thought, but it had to be an object, somewhere where, I guess they can't tell that it didn't break his nose because there's probably nothing there that you can base that off of. His teeth were not knocked out. I saw that. So it was in that small area going back to, like you said, over towards his ear. So anyways, I think that's where the rest of my notes kind of end right there. And we were kind of taking notes simultaneously. So we just wanted to use one set while we're doing the podcast, but to kind of wrap this thing up. And I don't know how quickly that'll be, but me saying wrap it up. Let's talk real quick about the other two possible theories so we have friends left and then we have law enforcement left. Let's talk about the friends aspect of it. And, one of the notes that I took down is that, Tom was killed and the person that killed him probably had to live close by to where the vehicle was dumped.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, I found out that the Castletines lived within walking distance.
Yeah, you hop a fence and walk through a small field.
Yeah, like 100 or 200 yards or something like that.
I think it was feet.
Oh, okay. 100 feet, yeah. You hop a fence and then you walk. They lived very close. And I made these notes before I even knew that they even lived over there. And so I was thinking to myself that all of these, I think we're getting clouded, like where we start thinking about this, we hang too much and everything's getting fuzzy and kind of clouded when we try to put in Tom's vehicle in this timeline of the videos. Because we are assuming that his car really was there in town, going through town. Right. Whereas to me, it would make more sense to not drive the vehicle around because it's going to be spotted. So in my opinion, after this event happened, the vehicle was stashed. Right. It was hidden somewhere, and the remains, if they were originally out at Lake Marvin, which now I don't know because of the limited amount of evidence that was found at the location. But if the remains were originally placed at Lake Marvin, I believe that it is likely that they were transported in a different vehicle, not Tom's vehicle. No. Now, we do have the question of the quarter tank of gas that was missing from Tom's car, but I think we already talked about that. That could have been from it idling. Or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what that would be, but it would definitely be more gas than just a one round trip to Lake Marvin. That's right. It would be that the mileage would not add up, and it would be, because we're talking about a quarter tank of gas, 60 to 80 miles. Lake Marvin was 14 miles from where the vehicle was found.
Yes.
So it definitely, there's too many miles there. And I think that the vehicle was dumped just before daylight to distance the person from the crime.
Yes.
They held on to it until it was absolutely like last minute. We got to get rid of this thing. Where do we get rid of it at? Someone picks the water treatment facility, right. however that happens, and the car's dumped out there. In my opinion, if you did this, you would have to have help to transport and move the body because, like we said, Tom's not 85 pounds.
Yeah. He's
6'1", 185, 200 pounds, somewhere around there. I think his mom said he was like, I think I asked her, around 185 pounds, 190 pounds. Dead weight. That's a lot. It's a lot. It's not easy to move. So, in my opinion, you would either have to have help or you're going to have somebody that's very capable. And I don't know anybody in the scenarios that we've been talking about that would have fit that.
No.
So, in my opinion, you have to have multiple people. And I thought if it were just kids, that there is no way they could pull off something like that without the help of someone more experienced, like a parent or whatever scenario you want to say.
Right. Yeah. And in that particular situation, that's when you come back to the old adage, one person can keep a secret, but not two.
Not two. So, once two people know, it's not a secret anymore.
So we using that particular, saying if this required multiple people, then the chances of a slip up happening and people finding out goes up much higher. So I don't really think that really adds up to me.
Yep. And
if multiple people were involved to try to cover it up, moving the body around, moving the vehicle, maybe one or two, maybe two, but 3, 4, it starts getting.
No, I think max 2 people.
Yeah.
If any more people knew than that, besides like if you went to a different route, which we'll talk about here in a minute, I think it's highly unlikely that secret would still be in the bag. I also said that whoever did this is still in town. That if they had help from family or friends or whatever, all of the persons involved still live in that town.
That's right.
And I believe that they would all be, if they are family members, they would all be keeping tabs on one another to make sure that this...
Absolutely.
In my opinion, I don't believe that if it was a kid that was involved, their parents would let them leave the town and go to college or start a job because kids talk a lot. Especially when I don't know if when you're younger, like especially with you getting into the military, me going to college, that when you met people and for some strange reason you just told them a lot of things that you wouldn't have normally told people.
Yeah,
oddly enough, and then you add in the fact that you're away from home and you can booze as much as you want, and then you're just drunk crying one night to somebody, just
guilt,
telling stories. Yeah,
yeah,
and I feel like that would have already came out at this point, but we're not there yet. And so that moves us to the next. So, I mean, is there anything you want to talk about in that realm? Because I feel like those are the bullet points that I have.
No.
But past that, we're speculating about.
Right, yeah. So, I still come back, even with the friends involved, I still come back to that timeline.
Timeline's
Somebody
so
had
tight.
to think it's very tight, and somebody had to think of it right there.
Instantly.
And that leads us to the final theory, which makes the most sense to me, but again, this is all speculation.
Yeah, so lastly, we got law enforcement and their possibility of being involved in this. And one of the things is I'm not going to say that they are. I can think to myself that a lot of things in this look kind of weird.
Yeah, they do.
And there's a lot of things that are definitely were done a way that I would not have done them, and I don't know anybody that would have.
I don't either.
There is a very razor thin line between ignorance and involvement in this case, and I think that it's very hard to say whether it was ignorance or whether it was involvement. It's very dicey. It's a very dicey area. However, Some of the things I had on there was the photo. That seems weird. There's no way for us to go back and confirm whether that is true or not.
That's right.
But speaking to Penny, she was 100% positive that she saw. I said, "Is it possible that you saw something different that now you think would be that?" And she's like, "What? Thomas at the gas pump?"
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't Thomas getting his senior pictures taken, and I just confused the two. I'm making that part up.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that she specifically said, "I saw him pumping gas in a picture that no longer exists."
Crystal clear. Yeah.
The sheriff's office lack in experience. I believe that plays into this no matter which way you go, whether you think that was intentional or whether they just did. I mean, I would think that where the smaller agencies that these guys came from before they came over, they wouldn't have a whole lot of experience in special crimes and what all goes into that and what the policies and procedures are, especially knowing that Nathan Lewis was not exactly known to keep up with his paperwork, as T. Cole pointed out in his training paperwork, where there was some allegations of forgery in the training area. And he was later told by T. Cole to step down.
That's right.
And so this was before his second term, which is something I said, I thought that he had run for the second term and had to step down right after that. That is incorrect. All of this took place just before he was going to be running for his second term. T. Cole told him that he needed to step down. He thought that meant that he just couldn't run for sheriff again.
Yeah, he was still just going to bust a chill in the seat.
Yeah, so he was going to sit in the seat and let somebody else take it from him, which later on it came out to be Deputy Clapp. And from what I understand and hear about him, he is a stand-up guy.
Yeah.
That's the feeling. I don't know the man personally, but the feeling I got from everybody that I talked to, good dude. And so I don't have anything to say further about him. But Pine Gregory was also dismissed from the sheriff's office.
Yep.
Because the DA's office said that they were no longer going to be taking his cases due to lack of evidence and bad report writing.
Yes, and that is
some verbiage like that.
Yeah, and
which is huge.
Yeah, and I have heard of that happening to people. If the people that prosecute the crimes you're arresting folks for no longer have faith in your ability to be a police officer, you're not going to have a job doing it.
Yeah.
Because they can't trust what you're going to do because it's either dirty or bad, or you're just a big dum-dum and can't do your job very well.
Terrible at your job.
Yeah, they're going to go ahead and say, yeah, you can't work here anymore because you're not a very good cop.
But if the DA's office says we will no longer accept cases from this person, you can't work there anymore.
Yeah, it's over.
Or, for that matter, anywhere, probably.
Total lack of faith in your ability to be a cop.
Yeah, and so, at this point, Lewis doesn't even fire Pine Gregory.
No, not even that.
Which I didn't know that, but I was like, wow. So from what I understand is that he was left on the payroll to do nothing, it sounds like.
That's right.
Drive around, basically, and do nothing.
Because he could look for buck shits.
He could, yeah. And there was even kind of a report that he was out on some guy's land, kind of wandering around. And the guy's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, just checking around." And he's like, "This is private property. You don't have permission to be here. Yeah, please leave.
Get off my land."
Yeah. And it was kind of like he was like put out about the whole situation. But he got pressure because basically he's holding this deputy position for a man that cannot operate in any sort of law enforcement capacity.
Yeah.
And so he was eventually fired, let go, whatever you want to say. And not long after this is whenever Nathan Lewis had to step down. And it's just, if you look at all of the different places where anything could have gone wrong, I feel like it did. I feel like the lack of experience when they processed or didn't process that car, the search, evidence logs, photos, cell phones, the body being found by Pine Gregory while he was just walking around on private land.
Yep.
It all, there's things that are happening in this scenario where I feel like, is it ignorance? Or is it involvement? and I can't tell you one way or the other on what that would actually be because we don't have, as just two not cops, we do not have all of the evidence, and we do not know what the Attorney General's office knows.
But what I can tell you is that of the 4 theories we've talked about, only one of them would have the know-how to turn off the phone quickly. Because it all comes down to that timeline, guys. I'm going to ride that thing as far as I can take it until I know more. That timeline is so tight. His phone is going straight to voicemail by midnight 13. So 11:28, he's at the gas station. We'll even include that time. That's 45 minutes.
Yeah.
That's all it is. 45 minutes to him pulling up, getting fuel. 45 minutes later, his phone is off. He's not at home. People are looking for him within the half hour of that. It's so tight. And when I'm coming down to, oh no, something bad happened to Thomas Brown, whatever the details are of that, we don't know, but somebody knew right away to turn his phone off.
Turn the phone off. In my opinion, based off what we have from the surveillance not being able to confirm, turn the phone off, get the vehicle off the streets and out of sight, and then dump the body or whatever happened to it, ditch the vehicle.
Yeah.
And then in this same process, in this same scenario, you have all of the right people in place to make sure the investigation goes wherever you want it to, and the evidence that's found is the evidence that you want to be found. I think it's very strange, in my opinion, that they found the vehicle where they did, and then all of a sudden out on Lake Marvin Road, they find the backpack. 5 miles down the road, they find the phone. A couple miles down the road, they find the body. It's like, in my opinion, it's like someone's dropping evidence to lead you to that body, but for what purpose?
Right, it does seem that way because there hardly wasn't a body there to be found.
Yeah, and also, not only that, but what was found was enough to identify Tom, but give you nothing else.
That's right. There was no bullet hole.
Nope.
There were no other. I mean, there's not enough of remains to be found to determine anything except for at some time, maybe before he died or maybe right after, he got hit in the face.
Yeah, he was whacked in the face, and the cause of death is undetermined.
That's right.
And
so
you don't know, kind of how that scenario could have played out, and I think we can run around in circles, and
that's all we've been doing.
Yeah, I really think that a lot of the information that Penny gave us that we may not have brought into the podcast is also the reason we did that is hearsay. Maybe somewhere down the road, if we set up like bonus episodes or like a Patreon deal or something like that, we could do extra episodes about things like that. But I feel like we all know the same things now, and we can make our own assumptions and maybe our own conclusions. I would caution everybody not to do that because we don't have all of the information. I'm with Mike if you look at the other 4 possibilities, and if I missed one that someone was thinking about, no one contacted me. But out of the 4 possibilities, I'm in line with you. The one that makes more sense, that could be a possibility, is that
somehow law enforcement was
somehow,
involved.
in some way, that law enforcement knew something or did something, or they just completely screwed this thing up in the most hardcore way possible, and not a dang person is ever going to take responsibility from it.
No, and that's very true. Again, before we wrap up, because we've been rattling on for a minute, there's still so much we don't know that's being, held back by people that are still investigating, and hopefully someday we will know. But I'm going to end by saying the very same thing I said in the last episode, which is I believe 100% that somebody still living in that town gets up every morning and goes about their life alive and well fully knowing what happened to Thomas Brown, and they're just not talking about it.
Yep.
I do believe that 100%, and hopefully someday we'll get some closure on that, because there's just too much unknown. There's just too many weird, possibly inept circumstances to go with the whole thing. It comes back to, what is it? I'd rather be dumb than lucky, lucky than dumb. Is there a statement like that?
Yeah, there is a saying like that, but now that you said it, I'm not sure which way it goes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we don't know. Is it a cover up, or is it?
Yeah, I think it's I'd rather be lucky than dumb. Or something. Yeah. But either way, like, that's the thing. It's like, was somebody so stupid about the way that they handled this that it was just worked out perfect?
Yeah,
just dumb luck. Mm-hmm. Just that dumb luck where it's like, wow, in no other scenario possible could it have been that they get away with it. Or if you change one thing in the way that they went about disposing of evidence and all of that, it changes the whole circumstance. And the one thing we do have on our side is time. Mm-hmm. We can wait and see if something happens. Of course, we'd always give updates if they did. But this could be something that literally no one ever knows about ever. Mm-hmm. Or 30 years from now, God willing, if I'm still alive.
Yeah.
Because I've just got poor genes.
Gotcha. Yeah, me too, buddy.
We find out what really happened to Tom Brown. And that's, I mean, I hope we do. Mm-hmm. Because I would like to, the reason I say don't jump to a conclusion is because really, I mean, if you really dive into this or you really start hounding on one idea or the other and you find out you're wrong, that's why I said I don't want to say anything bad about someone else. Mm-hmm. Knowing that if later on they come back and they're like, nope, it was this. And you're like, ooh.
Ooh, man, I'm just on a podcast saying something totally different.
yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. Reach out if you have any questions, comments, concerns.
Yeah, please. Yeah, that'd be great.
We always like to talk to people that listen to the show. And on the Two Not Cops episode, I'll read out some of the new likes and reviews and things like that. I wanted to do it on this episode, but we've already been running for a while right now, so I'll save that for the next go round. Uh-huh. But we really appreciate it. We really appreciate everybody kind of tuning in to this episode. I've noticed that there's been a pretty good spike of downloads, particularly on this subject. Uh-huh. And so I know a lot of people are interested in there, and I'll give you the rundown on how you can get a hold of us later. But we do appreciate everybody sticking in, and I told Penny personally that when this podcast ends, that doesn't mean that I'm walking away from this. I think Mike and I both are pretty well invested in this, and we want to see it through. Yeah. The stories, the podcast will go on, but I think this is one of the podcasts. This is one of the investigations, or however you want to say it, incidences that will probably stick with us for forever. Agreed. Especially with our ties, in with the family and stuff now. But anyways, we want to thank you guys again for listening to the show and checking it out, but we will talk to you guys again soon. Bye. Bye. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of The Murder Project. Our numbers are going up, our downloads are going up, and we have you guys to thank for that. If you're looking for us on any of the social media platforms, you can find us on Facebook at The Murder Project. If you need to search for us, it is facebook.com/podcasttmp. If you're looking for us on Instagram, we are at The Murder Project. And if you're looking for us on Twitter, we are at The Murder Pod. Make sure and go on whatever platform you're listening on, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, hit that subscribe button, leave us a review, and as always, hit that 5 stars.
Give me them 5 stars.
We need them, and we appreciate it to everyone that does. If you have any longer form questions or comments, we have an email address. That email address is contact@themurderproject.com. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. We look forward to speaking to you guys again on the next episode. But before we go, please remember,
head up, eyes up,
and stay alive.